This is a quick demo showing you how I would use the Forayz app for spring mushroom foraging. First, you can see on the right-hand side, we have a view panel. And in here we have different views. Right now we're looking at the default view here at the top. But of course there's a satellite option as well as recent rain, soil moisture, soil temperature, current snow coverage, and recent snow melt, as well as ecoregions and precipitation normals. And I'd like to just walk you through some of those to start. So first I'll switch back to the default view, and first we'll look at recent rain. It is today is February 19th, and you can see in the legend in the top right that this data is current as of February 15th. So it's always going to be a little bit behind because it takes a little bit of time for the data to come in and then get processed. But what we're looking at here is 14-day cumulative precipitation basically across the entire western U.S., or actually if I zoom out, it looks like in the entire U.S. So this is useful throughout the U.S. Now in the winter and the early spring, this isn't really that useful because in the Pacific Northwest, we don't have a lot of dry time and it's not really warm enough for most mushrooms. And so precipitation doesn't matter a whole lot. But in California, it can be useful because right now they're in the peak of their mushroom season. And so we can zoom in here and look at where are the areas that have had a good amount of rain recently. And those might be really, really good candidates for places to go looking for mushrooms right now. Now, why 14-day precipitation rather than just like yesterday, one day precipitation? Well, it takes a while for mushrooms to grow, and so having a longer window can give us a better sense for how conditions have been over a period of time. Now, other mushrooms like say chanterelles, they can grow. They can take quite a long time to grow, and so the precipitation window might be useful to have an even longer window. But this is, I think, really helpful for the parts of the season where it's a little drier, like maybe in late spring as you're starting to look for morels at higher elevations. Finding areas where it has rained recently or where precipitation is higher can be a really good way to focus in on more ideal areas and locations. Next, we'll look at soil moisture. Again, in the Pacific Northwest, soil moisture is not a problem from basically October through May for the most part, and really starting in late December, January, it's quite cold, and so there are very few mushrooms that are showing up anyway. It's not our peak foraging season. It's actually one of the quieter times of the year, January, maybe through March. So this soil moisture is going to be most useful during the drier times of the year. Soil temperature. This is the one that I think will be most or quite helpful for looking for morels in the mountains, or as we approach April, May, trying to find areas that are suitable is primarily looking for areas where there isn't snow and the soil has warmed sufficiently. And so you can see that many of these areas in the western Washington, Oregon are were in the 45-degree range as of February 8th. That was kind of a warm patch for us. But as we move back into some of the colder times here in late February, it will be the soil temperature will be cooling down again. As we start to approach morel season at low elevation areas in all of western Washington and Oregon, looking for these places where soil temperature is like above the 45-degree mark, maybe some of the best places to be looking. And then we can look out into the eastern slopes of the Cascades and see that it's going to stay cold there for quite some time. And so as we're looking for when is it going to be a good time to start checking out those burn areas on the eastern slopes, this can be really helpful for tracking when the soil temperature is finally getting to more optimal temperature. Snow coverage, of course, we're not going to be looking for mushrooms in places where there's currently snow. So one of the challenges that one can have in the springtime is maybe in western Washington, Oregon, can start to get quite warm. We have some warm patches in March, and so we start to think about getting into the mountains to check out some of those morel spots. Well, we can see here fairly easily where areas are still snow covered, but also as we get a little bit later into the season, we'll start to see these river valleys, the low elevation areas within the mountains, start to melt out first. And so we can use this as an indication of where there are areas where the temperature has, or I'm sorry, where snow conditions are more suitable for some of the spring mushrooms. And so this can just be a helpful way to visualize what areas maybe are still snow covered versus where the snow has receded. Another layer that doesn't have any meaningful visuals yet, but it will probably in early March, is recent snowmelt. I just tapped on it, but we're really not looking at anything here. Recent snowmelt will be useful for spring mushrooms in that one of the best parts about recent snowmelt areas is that the soil will have decent moisture because the snow has only recently receded, and so it will be a good place to be looking for some of the snowmelt specific species if you're just interested in finding mushrooms in general, but also using recently melted areas can be a useful indication on where morels are going to start showing up fairly soon. This is the first time that I've created and used this specific layer, and so we'll see as the season progresses how useful that happens to be for targeting specific areas, but it's not really something that you can easily find in any weather apps or satellite overviews, current satellite. So I think it's new. It's something that nobody else has, and it might be a really unique way to find some promising areas. The last couple of views here that I'd like to show are just simply ecoregions. This is just a nice way to visualize the different areas around our region to get a sense for areas that are similar to one another. So if you have found that these areas maybe in the high Cascades were useful for a particular mushroom, like say boletes in the summertime, you can, that's this kind of pink area here in the center, you might be able to use this for looking for other areas that have similar, that is a similar ecological region, ecoregion. Same here with like the Eastern Cascades, and you can see that that it flows down, that there's a lot of area that is very similar ecologically speaking, from northern Washington into southern Oregon. This can be improved, still have more better subsets of these areas, but I think for of you who are any of us, including myself, who are still trying to learn more about these various ecoregions throughout the Pacific Northwest and want to understand more about what areas are similar to one another. I think this is a great way to start to visualize that. And then the last one here that I would like to share is precipitation normals. So what's unique about this is average rainfall over the entire year. And so kind of similar to the ecoregions, this can be a useful way to visualize areas that are similar to one another, though, here in the, western Washington, the Olympic Peninsula, and then on the high Cascades are different from one another ecologically speaking, but they do share some similarities in the amount of rainfall that they get. Also, you've probably, for those in Washington, have probably heard of this rain shadow around the Squim area on the northeast side of the Olympic Peninsula, and you can see that visualized here quite well. And just to give you a better sense on what that rain shadow, how much of a rain shadow that actually is, we zoom out and look for similar color here in the eastern Cascades. We can see that. See if I can find. We can see that Leavenworth, the Leavenworth area, and actually east towards the Wenatchee area have very similar annual rainfall as this small rain shadow here in the Northeast Olympic Peninsula and into the San Juan Islands. And corresponding to this difference in precipitation is we'd probably find some unique differences in the mushrooms that a person might find in this rain shadow area, including vegetation. But you can use this just kind of across the Pacific Northwest, and I will probably extend this later if there's interest in learning a little bit more about, how wet is it really in, say, Seattle and Portland versus, the difference in how wet it is along the coastal areas. So we'll move back to the default view here. And now I want to show you some of the data layers. And this is for the springtime in morel foraging. This path burns layer will probably be the most useful for most of you. So I'm going to actually just start by decluttering this and using just burns from start year and end year 2025. Let's zoom out here. And now we can see burns across the western US and just in the year 2025. So just last year. Here in year 2026, these 2025 burns, last year burns, are going to be the most promising places to be foraging for burn morels. And so you can now use this to zoom into very specific areas. Let's go to something very distant. I don't want to get into too much detail in the more populated areas right now. We'll just go up into northeast Washington, and we can see here there are a few large burns. Maybe I'll change the view to satellite so that we can just look at this a little bit better and see it relative to the tree cover. But we can see that there are two large burns in areas with a fair amount of tree cover. So maybe I'll just click on here, and we can see the size of the burn at 14,000 acres. At the top, just under the Crown Creek title, you see 2025, the year that the burn was. It includes forest, and we've been able to confirm that through the satellite view, as well as it includes public land. And so this would be a good location to be looking for burn morels once conditions are suitable. We see tree canopy coverage of around 21%. That's auto-calculated, and it's hard for me to be able to verify that, but this is what I've calculated. The environmental data. So this is the kind of information that we would care about when trying to decide when is a good time to be checking out the Crown Creek burn for burn morels. Well, right now there is snow. I mean, of course, on the ground, but not much. So it ranges from 0 to 3 inches. It's been pretty dry around Washington, around the western U.S., or at least Pacific Northwest this winter. Soil temperature is somewhere in like in the low 30s. That's clearly not ideal for morels, but today at February 19th, or as of the data date, it's way too early anyway for morels. But as we get into May, we'll see that the soil temperature will be increasing significantly, and we can use that as an indication for when is a good time to be going out and checking this specific burn for morels. 14-day precipitation, pretty low. It must have been quite dry over the last 2 weeks. But soil moisture is still pretty high. It looks at 41%, I'd say is on the high side. Probably is snowmelt that is causing that. But also with temperature not being very high, the soil moisture is, it's easy for the soil to maintain its moisture level. Now, if you are interested in looking for burn areas where maybe it's others are less likely to be exploring, one of the places you might be interested in is looking at burns from 2 years ago. So I'm just going to change this to 2024. And now we can look for burns. This was a really popular burn for people to be exploring last year in 2025. Click on it. This is the Retreat Fire, the 2024 Retreat Fire. And it was an absolutely massive fire. And with 45,000 acres. Elevation, knowing the elevation difference can be helpful because low elevation areas are going to melt out first and be more suitable earlier. But then as the season progresses, you can move to higher and higher and higher elevations. So this can be a useful metric or I guess statistic data to be using as just an indication for how long the season might be in that area and various elevations you might explore. The helpful thing about looking at these past burns is that many burn morel foragers are going to be going to the 2025 burns. And so if you have some easily accessible earlier burns, like say from 2024, 2023, and would like to be looking in areas where others are less likely to be exploring, this is a great place to begin. Similarly, I'll look at timber harvests. This is another place where a person can be exploring for morels. Now, the timber harvest data is imperfect. It isn't nearly as detailed as the past burns, but it can still be useful. You can find timber harvests potentially more closer to you than you might be able to find recent burns. And so here I'll just go into the Gifford Pinchot, and we can see these small harvest areas. Click on them and we can learn a little bit more about it. Here you can see that it was completed in September 30th, 2024, but that would have been over potentially a 1 or 2 year period where these were harvested. So the data is not perfect, but it can still be an interesting way to find other areas that you can explore for morels. And in these timber harvest areas are a little bit different type of area to explore than 1 year old burns. The last couple of things I will share are some areas of interest, and these are both. I'm including major cities here where I'll start adding data on like the 14-day precipitation and estimates on when morels might be fruiting in some of these urban areas. But then I've also included areas, and I'll just kind of zoom in something not very far, areas like Ross Lake here. That's a very large area, but it can give you a sense for some areas that I think are interesting for exploring for mushrooms of any sort, and then it can just be at different times during the year. But here I'm starting to aggregate data like the forest composition based off of USDA forestry data or survey data. When morels might be fruiting in specific areas here, as well as some recent weather, like the past 7 days of precipitation, or the prior 7 days of that, or the number of freezing days in the past 30. The days below freezing is useful or can be useful in especially in the springtime or in the late fall, as they're the areas that are freezing or have been freezing recently are less likely to have mushrooms right now. And so you can use this to determine when an area maybe isn't worth your time or worth the drive to go checking it out. But in the springtime, as it's starting to warm up, you can just keep an eye on this and and know when some of your favorite areas might be suitable for beginning to explore. And then similarly, in the fall, as mushroom season is really going, you can start to find areas that are becoming unsuitable for mushrooms by tracking when areas are starting to freeze, even if the snow cover layer isn't showing you any new snow cover. And the last one that I'll share are events, and these currently are just my events, the Salish Mushroom events. But here you can find some classes that I'm hosting in the Seattle area, as well as I have a class and a separate foray that I'm hosting in the Darrington area this spring. So you can click on these. We'll just have a quick look. You can see the date, April 25th at 10 a.m. We'll have a foray in the Darrington area, and you can click here to view events or the event details and learn a little bit more about what is happening and purchase tickets. Over time, I'll add more events from some of the local mushroom clubs and other mushroom festivals that are happening, so that you can use this view as a way to just get a better sense on what's going on around the region. Hope you find this helpful, and feel free to reach out anytime if you have questions or suggestions on ways that I can improve this for you.